Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, a show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. We have a special guest on the show today. We're joined by Vincent Greco, Director of People Analytics at HubSpot. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for the intro. I am doing well. Excited to be here. Excited to chat with you.
Nice to see some actual plants in someone's house.
Try to keep, the remote work setup looking nice and lively. We've got the whiteboard back there too. So I really invested. I feel like that's been a really big plus for me this year, is kind of setting up that work from home area.
Be honest, is it you who are responsible for the plants or someone else?
No, that's my partner. She is very much she's like, look, you're gonna be on camera a lot, you're talking to your team. Have a nice like kind of setup that's bright and airy. So yeah, she gets all the credit for that.
Yeah, I bet the sales, random way to start a podcast for us, sorry everyone listening, but I bet the sales of plants have gone through the roof.
Absolutely. I think paintings, plants, any sort of decor is definitely been much more emphasis on that than in the past, for sure.
Yeah, the problem with me, I can't keep them alive, the plants. The only thing I could keep alive is a cactus, and that's only because it's designed for the desert. So
well, next show, maybe we'll do a planting tips and how to keep plants alive.
Yeah. Before we go any further, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and your, personally and your background and journey to where we are now.
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, so I'm the director of People Analytics at HubSpot. I also lead recruiting operations as well. So it's a pretty big scope for a People Analytics team, which is exciting. I joined HubSpot about 2.5 years ago to build the People Analytics team. Prior to that, I was at Liberty Mutual Insurance, was their first data scientist on their talent analytics team back in 2014. Took a number of roles throughout the company there, really had a lot of exposure to people analytics from that work. But honestly, I think like many folks in this space, it was a pretty non-linear path. Like I started out a long time ago in HR consulting, working at Towers Wells Watson, doing kind of survey work and things like that. Then I went to grad school and then went back into consulting and kind of landed in people analytics a little bit randomly, but I'm really excited that I'm in this space. It's just a really interesting industry, just a ton of interdisciplinary work and just really cool problems to solve. So it's been a lot of fun. I think the journey has been really interesting, and I'm just excited to see how the space kind of continues to grow over the next few years. There's just been a lot of really cool work happening, and obviously with COVID and the pandemic, it's really, I think, brought an even greater emphasis to data-driven decision-making and people analytics teams. So that's been, I think one of the things that I've certainly noticed over the last year, just a lot more emphasis on people analytics, which is great.
Amazing. You know what's great about this as well? It's also quite a new field of work where many leaders like yourself actually have the opportunity to build something from scratch. There's not many functions out there that are very new. I say new, but you know what I mean. That you have the opportunity to go into a business and build something from scratch. And it's something that a lot of the leaders, although it's very hard to do, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity, right?
It is. It's been a lot of fun, as you said. Definitely some challenges, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. HubSpot's been great because I think they really had the mindset of we're going to bring someone in and really empower and trust them to build this function in the way that they think kind of makes the most sense. So I've really felt a lot of autonomy and kind of confidence from the leadership team around how to build this function. And what was really cool was we started out as a team of one, and now we have over 10 analysts. We have an operations group as well. That's a number of folks. I mean, the team has grown incredibly in 2.5 years. And I think honestly, that's a testament to HubSpot having certainly faith and really, using this sort of work and analysis that our team does. But also, I just think the impact that we're driving. I just honestly think our team is great. We really partner a lot with the business and other functions, and we really try to show the ROI on all the work that we do. And I think that's really led to a lot of growth in our team, which is obviously it's been great to see.
Yeah, I just realized that maybe not everyone listening knows who HubSpot is. So give everyone a quick
Yes.
intro to who HubSpot are, first and foremost.
Absolutely. Yeah. So HubSpot is a leading customer relationship management, like a CRM platform. And we provide software and support for customers to help them grow better. That's really our mission. But what the platform really includes is kind of sales, services, marketing sorts of tools that folks can use to help as part of like growing their business. We're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's kind of where I am. But we have offices globally across Europe and Asia as well.
And you're growing rapidly, right? Because I remember when I first came across HubSpot, all of a sudden over the next few years, so many companies and other entrepreneurs that I was working with, what are you using? HubSpot. Why are you using them? Well, we can do our sales, we can do our marketing, we can do custom, we can do all of it in one platform. And I was like, who is this company? Let's go. So you grow, and I'm sure you're still growing rapidly right now, right?
Yeah, it's been really exciting. We're kind of in that scale up mode, and honestly, it's really interesting from a people analytics perspective. Since prior to this, I was at Liberty Mutual, which was pretty large and obviously not growing at the same rate. And so I just think the problems are very different from like a kind of a HubSpot compared to a bigger kind of corporate sort of setting. Again, both interesting, but I think it's really led to just honestly trying to keep pace with the business. I think that's the biggest thing. The business is constantly, changing, evolving, and our leaders as well are very much thinking in kind of short-term cycles. And so how do we make sure that the work that we do is in line with that and also is timely, right? So I think there's just a lot of work that we need to do in terms of how we set up and scope our projects to kind of match that speed. And I think that's where we've been doing a lot more on like agile kind of working, MVPs, and things that can kind of we can bring to market fairly quickly and get feedback, so that we're not in these kind of long planning cycles where maybe it takes 6 months for us to do something and the business has already moved on to something else. So it's like, how do you create kind of a framework within your team to make sure that you can kind of operate at the speed of the business that you're in? So I think that's been an interesting challenge. And obviously, as far as building a team, trying to create sort of that culture within our own team, that's how we're going to operate and do analytics work at HubSpot.
Let's start from the beginning then.
Yeah.
Now, do you say 2 years in? 2 years?
About 2.5.
2.5 years. When you came in, kind of looking back, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in building the team?
Yeah, so I think it's probably similar for other folks who have come into a company where there has not been a people analytics function before. So I think a lot of it is just building a brand and some form of credibility, right? So you're coming in, not many folks maybe understand what people analytics does. Maybe they have a very a traditional view of maybe what an HR team looks like. So it's trying to educate folks on like, these are the types of things that our team is capable of doing, some of the things that we can do to add value to the business side. But so you're kind of doing that, you're doing a little bit of that roadshow, but then you're also like investing in the infrastructure, right? Like, how do you get your data pipelines in order? How do you build out the data architecture, the surface sort of the insights? And so I think that's where it really was an interesting balancing act, because you didn't want to say, okay, we're just going to focus on getting our data house in order and not do any sort of roadshow or any sort of like quick wins, because otherwise, you're just not really going to be on the radar of the business. But at the same time, you do need to invest in those things and kind of incrementally grow and kind of build that. So it was just kind of this delicate balancing act of like, how do we set ourselves up for scale, but also start to do some stuff and show the value of our team and some of our capabilities. And so I think that was probably like the biggest just challenge in terms of how do you do that in a way that, both adds value to the business, but also sets us up for the longer term. So I think that was probably like the biggest challenge that we faced up front.
Yeah. It's almost like a startup environment that reminds me of my own company when I built this business. This balancing act of building the business, scaling a business whilst delivering for my customers at the same time. And it's so hard to get it off the ground. Obviously it takes a few years to get to the position where you're like, okay, we're in a position where there's a bit more stability. there's some foundations that have been built, but it's that initial 6 to 12 months that's super difficult to do so. How did you choose the areas of where to focus your time and attention for those quick wins? Because there's so many things, areas that you could focus on. So how did you know, look, this is the area, this is the pain point? Like practically, how
Yeah.
did you identify that pain point?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And maybe to go back to your startup analogy, I mean, really, we were very focused on like that product market fit. And I think everyone kind of talks about that. It's really trying to understand like, hey, what are the biggest pain points the business is facing from a people perspective? And what could we do or build or generate in terms of insights that can really help to address that? So quite frankly, a lot of my time initially was just spent on the kind of classic listening tour and really just spending a lot of time with our leaders from across the business to just better understand like, hey, like what are some of the big challenges you're facing from a business standpoint, kind of operationally, and how do you see either like the people strategy or talent strategy being maybe one lever that you can pull to address that challenge or to improve that, metric or whatever it is. So I think a lot of it was just trying to first just understand how our business works, what are the big challenges, and then start to bring to the table some thoughts on like where we can partner and where we can add value. And again, I think to your point on quick wins, what we tried to be very mindful of is like we did not want a project where it was like, hey, wait 6 months and we'll get you that answer, right? So I think we were trying to be mindful of that and try to find projects where there was either like a net new data collection that we can do, whether it's a survey or something to that effect, or leverage data from a system that already was in fairly good order. So maybe like our recruiting data or something where we have already a decent kind of data model set up that we can use for analysis. So again, I think it was trying to like set that expectation around like, okay, what's the challenge? What is stuff that we can do right now that could immediately add value? And how can we package that in a way that really shows that like we understand how the business operates and we see how people data can help to inform that. And I think that's the biggest thing, right, from my perspective, in that we really tried in the first year to align a lot of our work to business outcomes. Now our scope has expanded quite a bit. So in addition to kind of our, business facing groups, we also have kind of internal teams that are more internal focused, working on like HR sort of problems. And then we have recruiting operations as well. So we kind of span the gamut now, but to start, we really said like, let's make an intentional focus on the business to really start to get some of that kind of quick win ROI that again shows some of the stuff that we can do and hopefully starts to build a bit of credibility across the broader company.
Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in retrospect?
Yeah, I mean, it's always like a million things that I certainly would have done differently. But honestly, I felt pretty good about our strategy. I think it's just a matter of, again, like I did the listening tour. I tried to really refrain from doing a lot of work as soon as I got to HubSpot. But I think it's natural when you're a new employee at a pretty fast moving company, you want to jump into stuff really quickly. So I think we probably could have been even slower in terms of our initial set of projects, just truly make sure that we were finding the right things. I think we landed in the right place. So I don't think it was like a miss necessarily, but I think there is that balance of when you're coming into an entirely new company and a new function, there's this kind of pressure, at least like self-imposed pressure, and that you want to show that value fairly quickly. But I do think there is definitely value in slowing down and really listening and just making sure you're really picking the right things. Because honestly, if the first 2 or 3 projects that you work on don't land, it just becomes harder to kind of build that credibility early on. So
it's worth taking a bit more time.
Yeah, and the way we try to structure a team now is like we try to do more of like a portfolio approach to projects. So we have things that are maybe quicker wins, as well as things that are longer term plays that maybe is a bit of risk involved in terms of like, will it work, will it not? But if you have kind of a diverse portfolio, like you're going to be overall in a pretty good spot. But like initially when we first started out, like I don't know if we had that like kind of foresight to think about our work in this sort of portfolio sort of way.
Something that I haven't really spoken about with your peers though, but in reality, were you literally doing those projects on your own, whilst hiring a team, whilst building the infrastructure, and whilst doing that kind of listening to or build relationships. Was that how did that make you
It seems
feel?
pretty accurate. Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's pretty close to how it worked. I mean, certainly it was a bit sequenced, and honestly, I was able to bring on a couple of awesome folks fairly early, so that really helped. So it wasn't like totally a one person effort, but yeah, I mean, as a new leader in kind of a growing company where you don't maybe have a ton of resources, it is very much like that startup mindset, and that like you're doing a bit of everything, right? Like you have your hands in every aspect of your business, just like you would for your team. So yeah, I was absolutely getting in the weeds of, statistical kind of analysis, writing code, working with our data engineers on the data infrastructure, doing the road shows, like trying to wear the consultative kind of hat. So I mean, it was a little bit of everything. Now we're a lot more specialized and streamlined, which has been good for my sanity, certainly. But yeah, it is very much a kind of a pretty big lift up front. But it's great because you do get to really understand like every aspect of your team. So I do think
Hmm.
it makes you like a better manager in the future because you actually understand all of the roles and like the work at a fundamental level. So it hopefully helps you coach a bit
Yeah.
better as you start to build out the team.
I just wanted to mention that because there's a number of people analytics leaders that I've spoken to that have gone from big teams to then coming into a company where they're starting from zero and they've really struggled and they didn't
Yeah.
really expect that. So it's good to, if you are listening and you do want to go into a company and build a people analytics function from scratch, just keep in mind that you're not going to have that, you know, all of those resources that you're perhaps typically used to. If you're coming from a company which has a well-established people analytics function, that is as well.
Yeah. And I
So
think you're
something to
kind
keep
of
in
betting on
mind.
yourself a little bit, right? Because you are maybe coming from a group where you had a lot more resources, or maybe it was easier to secure resources, and now you're kind of coming into a situation that's a little bit less certain. But that said, there's a lot of reward if it works well, right? So if you are able to show that value up front, do those sorts of things, at least what I've found is that that's rewarded like tenfold. And obviously our team has grown, pretty dramatically in a couple of years. And again, I think that's a testament to like the level, the quality of the work that we're doing, but also just the confidence and sort of the value that folks have seen in terms of the work that we do. So I think that's really helped, and now we're in a space where like yeah, we can actually start doing really interesting stuff kind of outside of our core kind of work because we have a lot more resources at our disposal.
Hmm. I know a focus for you that you're really passionate about is sort of data and management strategy for scaling
Yeah.
remote work programs. For obvious reasons,
Mm-hmm.
for everyone in the world is focused on this in some way, and I know many of your peers that I speak to have been pulled in different directions over the last year, off of current projects to focus directly on this. Walk us through your thinking behind this, the decision making that you and kind of the team have gone through, and kind of where you are on that journey.
Yeah, it has been a journey, and yeah, I think everyone to some level, I think has kind of had a similar experience in terms of this being a pretty unprecedented time, and we're all trying to navigate through this, and particularly with remote work, it has been this sort of like great experiment around like, hey, like what happens when we just have everyone work remotely, kind of at the flip of a switch? Like, how does that work? So yeah, I think as far as like how we thought about it and some of the things we tried to do from a data perspective. So probably similar to other companies, we really amped up our survey strategy. So pulse surveys and really trying to better understand how we can best support our employees because obviously they were going through a pretty tough time, a lot of uncertainty. And so a lot of our kind of initial questions were just checking in to be like, hey, like how is it going? How are you feeling? How can we support you? And so that was really helpful in terms of getting a pulse from our employees. But then like more tactically trying to figure out, well, what can we be doing to really make the employee experience better in this sort of remote context? So, we ask questions about like the resources you have at home and whether, you need additional equipment, technology, things to kind of get up and running in your day-to-day role that would really help. We also focused on, burnout and just kind of how folks are feeling, mentally, right? This is obviously a pretty traumatic time. So just trying to check in there. And then I think third, like collaboration, right? I think like how folks are working in a remote environment is really interesting, particularly because we have to work a lot more asynchronously. Folks are on
Mm.
different schedules, different timelines. It's hard to maybe coordinate as effectively without being in an office. So our survey strategy really tried to inform those things and gave us some good context around how we could use that as part of a broader remote work strategy that would hopefully get us through this period, but also scale into the future. And our chief people officer has talked a lot about HubSpot being a hybrid company and us feeling really confident that we could actually scale kind of this sort of remote work environment and give folks more flexibility, not just in the COVID period, but kind of beyond. And I think a lot of the data that we put in place kind of gave us confidence that we could do that. But more importantly too, like having a measurement framework that we can then use going forward, right? So like this helped us get to like where we are now,
It's like
but
as a
obviously things will
benchmark.
continue to change.
Hmm. So you'll be able to benchmark.
Exactly. Benchmark and kind of track, okay, if I'm opting for a full-time remote role and maybe someone else's flex in terms of maybe coming into the office a couple of days a week, or other folks who have gone fully in office and kind of that's what they do, post-COVID, what are those employee experiences like? Hopefully
Mm.
they're fairly similar as far as the things that we care about, right? And if there are differences or if there are things that are pain points, how can we proactively kind of flag those things? And as you said, having kind of these baselines or benchmarks that are now in place allows us to hopefully track over time how we're doing on those fronts and just make sure we're kind of proactively addressing things as they come up. Because I suspect that we haven't fully figured out everything, right? So I'm sure there are going to be challenges and things that we didn't fully anticipate. And I think the data can give us some indication on that, which I think is kind of this really the way we're thinking about our survey strategy kind of going forward.
Hmm. When you sat down with the team and looked at the data, both yourself and the leadership team, what were some of the concerns that arose?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, as I said earlier, I think like the couple of acute like tactical things were like resources. So like folks, not everyone had like a remote work
That's
setup,
true.
right?
Yeah.
Like, so this was something that was like in the kind of beginning stages of full-time remote. Folks were like, hey, I don't have like the monitors that I need
And
or
you
the
can't even
desks or
find
the
one online as
chairs.
well. They're all sold out. Trying to find a
It really
laptop or a
was. It
webcam.
was challenging. Yeah, webcam, all those things. And
Yeah.
so part of it was, we kind of identified that as a quick win and we offered kind of stipends and things to kind of get folks, some of the like the things that they need just to be able to do their job in kind of a remote environment. But like secondly, I think the thing that like jumped out to us and is something we're really being intentional about, but like we have to continue to work on is just that like connectivity collaboration piece, which I think is, obviously just different in a kind of remote or hybrid context versus when everyone's in the office. So I feel confident we have a good strategy in place for how to address that. And I think HubSpot's always been a place where we feel like culture is a verb, not a noun, in the sense that like culture is not tied to a physical location. It's really kind of how folks interact and work with each other. And that doesn't need to be tied to a physical place.
Yeah.
But it does mean that like we have to figure out mechanisms to create that sort of connective tissue in this sort of remote world.
Can you
I
share
don't
some
know
of
that like
those?
we've ever done that.
Can you share some of those? What are some practical things that you're doing to facilitate collaboration? Because that is one of the biggest challenges, let's be honest.
Totally.
I'm even struggling with a small team to keep that energy and that passion.
Yes, no, I think you're right. Yeah, I think one of the things our chief people officer has talked about, which I think is spot on, is like we talk a lot about like our tech stack, and that's like a big thing that we, obviously
Hmm.
emphasize, as being a kind of a product and, an engineering type of company. But I think our communication stack is actually just as important and really giving folks a better sense of the communication tools that they have at their disposal and also what are the norms around communication, right? So the more we can, as we bring in new hires and folks that maybe don't have a previous experience in a remote world, what are the sorts of tools they should use and when should they communicate, let's say asynchronously, kind of not in real time versus needing to jump on a Zoom or a meeting. I think the one thing that everyone probably acknowledges is that we all over-indexed on the Zoom meetings like early on, and I think there was, there was a cost to that in terms of folks just feeling pretty burnt out, quite frankly, on the number of meetings. So I think we're trying to figure out like, hey, that's not probably sustainable in the long term. So there has to be more investment on those sort of asynchronous communication tools, whether that's Slack or email or other sorts of forms of communication that like are not dependent on getting an answer immediately. And I think we just as a culture need to continue to feel comfortable in working in that sort of environment, which is a little bit of a new muscle in some ways, right? Because I think we're all used to just getting
It's just disrupted
answers
everyone's
in real
routines,
time.
right? It's disrupted everyone's
Yeah.
routines, the way we communicate. Have you noticed that people don't even call each other anymore? It's like if they want to have
I
a
know, I
chat,
haven't used the phone in forever.
yeah, if they want to have a chat with you, they put a Zoom, like, they just schedule a Zoom meeting. I'm like, just give me a call or drop me a message.
It's true. And honestly, I think we've been trying to do that, where we would actually have like no Zoom meetings and
Yeah,
folks would actually call in just to kind of break up
go for a
the
walk
Zoom
while you're
fatigue.
having, go for a walk and talk. This, yeah.
I think we're trying to be creative there, but yeah, I mean, I think these are things that are important. And again, like as you get new folks into the company, it's like, how do you acclimate them to some of these, new ways of working, which is a little bit different than maybe what folks are used to.
And that I suppose that really helps then that you and the team also look after that side of the business as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the, the great things about our team is that we actually have uh, a pretty broad scope. And so, yeah, I think we have a lot of data across not just like kind of the business, but on the recruiting side as well. And we really kind of get that holistic picture. And it does allow us to like design and implement kind of solutions that are pretty holistic and they're not like kind of sub-optimized to a specific group or to a specific team. A lot of stuff that we do is fairly scalable, which has been obviously great, and it's awesome for impact as well. So yeah, I think it's been an interesting ride. I mean, I think we're all still trying to figure out how to navigate, but I feel pretty good that we've been able to lead with data and make some pretty good decisions.
The other area that I know you're working on is how to use behavioral change and experimentation to drive business impact. What does that mean, first and foremost, for everyone that perhaps aren't familiar,
Yep.
and then tell us more about the work you're doing in this area?
Yeah. So certainly this is not a new idea. I think there's been a lot of companies that have invested resources in this notion of like, how do you use sort of data and like kind of intelligent nudges or something to that effect to drive kind of this sort of small scale behavioral change. So, there's a lot of companies in this space. Humu is one that really has, I think, kind of made this like a big part of their offering. And I just think it's great. I think there's just a lot of interesting stuff that you can learn from how to use like behavioral interventions to drive sorts of like changes, right? And so I think the traditional HR model has been very like long tail change management as like the way to implement a program or to drive a certain outcome. I think what we've learned certainly in the academic literature is actually like more subtle manipulations of choices can actually lead you to those outcomes in a little bit more of a light lift way, right? So yeah, so we think a lot about this certainly in the context of the employee experience and like, are there ways we can use behavioral science to just improve how our employees work at HubSpot? So I think a couple of examples that come to mind. So one is like internal mobility, right? So folks apply for internal roles at HubSpot, and hopefully they kind of get those roles. But there are obviously cases where maybe they don't get the role for whatever reason. And I think we all recognize that's a fairly pivotal moment, right? So like if you apply for a role that you were really excited about internal to HubSpot and for whatever reason doesn't work out, that's probably a great time to have a career growth conversation with your manager to kind of come up with some actionable next steps, right? That way you're not like left with like this rejection and it's
You're
kind
not
of
missing an
upsetting
opportunity
and
as
it
well, are you? Mm.
exactly. And so like one of the things we tried to do is like have a kind of a nudge to managers to be like, hey, this is probably a great time to have a conversation with your employee about career growth and try to come up with a plan to either apply for that role again in the future or maybe look for some other roles. And honestly, we've just seen a lot of good outcomes kind of come from that. And it's a very kind of small scale kind of change. And it's just a little bit of a reminder to managers to like have that conversation. So not a huge lift on our part, but can have a big impact on the employee experience, and also kind of set those folks up to have hopefully, a
Yeah.
really good career growth conversation, a plan going forward.
And engagement, right? A huge.
Absolutely.
It's just going to have a huge impact on engagement. And also in the same context, I've seen loads of companies do something similar where if they don't get the role, they'll then nudge them with other opportunities. So a nudge,
Yes.
oh, by the way, we have these other roles that you may not be aware of. And then again, similar to feed that in, or even to nudge them in the future about roles that come up, similar to the one they applied for as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the thing too is just like being more comfortable experimenting. I think just in general, I think we've been trying to take more of a experimentation approach to the work that we do. And, I think you can just learn a lot from like what works and what doesn't. So even when things don't work or you don't get the lift that you expected, you learn a ton about, what went wrong or like why it didn't work. So we've been trying to lean into more of that like test and learn sort of mindset. And yeah, we are kind of building out this behavioral science kind of group within our team to really focus on this more and try to scale up some of the stuff that we're doing. But yeah, it's been exciting. There's a lot of just interesting work you can do in that space. And we've been really trying to, I think, just think carefully around how we can use it to really help do the things we want to do.
Well, as a CEO and a leader here, it's helped me a lot because some of the tools that we have, I'll go to send an email, say, Chris, are you sure you want to send an email to Ivan at 10 p.m.? Maybe there's a better time, and then I'll schedule it to send it, the next day in the morning. It's those things like that. Or you sure you want to, put another 5 Zoom calls in your diary today because you've already got 7? There's, those little nudges that are now being, developed into these different tools that we use are super helpful.
Absolutely. And it's great because that stuff is all based on just really interesting work. Like I know Microsoft has done a ton on this to kind of show, hey, when you are sending emails to your team at like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., yeah, like it's pretty demotivating, and folks tend to not get super excited about that because now they're maybe, have to jump back online, or they're kind of nervous about the email. So yeah, like the fact that really interesting kind of complex analysis then, resulted in a very kind of simple solution around how you can try to like avoid those types of things, I think is so clever, and honestly is like the beauty of behavioral science in many ways, and that the solution was pretty simple and not something that was like overly engineered.
Yeah, you're right. Especially now, it's kind of we're always on, right? And there's no boundaries now because we don't have that natural work rhythm. It's just 24/7. Like even we have clients all over the world, and I'm not going to mention who they are, but one of my clients, scheduled a call with me today at 10 p.m. And I was like, I don't really want to be in the office at 10 p.m. Doing a call. But again, because we don't have that natural connection of an office environment, or, not even speaking on the phone, they just assume that, of course, Chris will take their call. They don't even think about it, right? Yeah. Whereas if they got a nudge saying, by the way, Chris is in the UK, you're in California, maybe he doesn't want to be there at 10 p.m. Reschedule the call.
No, and I think honestly, that's been the biggest, like, so one of the things that the literature has shown, a lot of really good research on like productivity in kind of this time and like how folks are working in a remote environment. And I think there's a lot of like mixed results, but like one of the, narratives is like actually productivity has gotten better or hasn't really decreased. Since kind of COVID and the office closures, which, empirically could be right, certainly. But I think to your point, what maybe sometimes is lost in that is that sort of work-life balance trade-off that maybe we're not seeing. So like maybe to get to that back to like pre-COVID levels right now in terms of productivity, it's coming at a cost of folks feeling burnt out or
mental health,
like they have to work a lot more. And that's not something we measure as well, right?
I know, so we're seeing this huge increase, aren't we? Like, it's so misleading to so many people. Hey, we've got a huge increase in productivity. Yeah. I'm like, yes, but at what cost? Because you're not measuring the fact that these people are burning themselves out. I've had my own employees. And myself, I did it to the point where I started having anxiety attacks. I started feeling depressed. And I just realized I was just But if you looked at if you looked at a data, a spreadsheet, you'd be like, Chris is through the roof. Productivity is amazing. Great news. But at what cost? Because we're not measuring that. So that's something that I'm really
Absolutely.
concerned about as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to keep an eye on. What in terms of your team, because this is a big challenge as well. What was your strategy in terms of building it? What skills do you require first? How do you prioritize and build that out? I know every time I ask this question, it's normally a different answer. So I'm just wondering what your mindset was of, what was that first 2, 3 hires? Did they come within the business? Because a lot of times these skills exist within our finance team, sales, marketing, which many companies don't actually realize. Were they part of your network? What was your approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, everyone has like different ways of approaching this, but certainly the way I try to think about it is again like similar to that startup mentality where like you need folks that are one just super adaptable and like are comfortable kind of jumping in and like owning a bunch of stuff, right? Because there isn't like the unlimited resources to really specialize. So I think that was an important just kind of behavioral aspect because we needed someone who was like comfortable working in ambiguity, uncertainty, and like adapting to the environment. But yeah, it was kind of this mix of like we looked for really good, strong technical folks that really understood data, not necessarily from like the complexity piece. It's more just like how to really do like data detective work and understand really noisy and messy data, which people data tends to be. So I think it's just really looking for the sorts of skills around like, does someone truly understand how to like dig deep within data and pull out signal where there is signal? And that's not like it's not an obvious skill maybe to
That
like
sounds
kind
like
of
my worst
screen
nightmare,
for.
to be honest.
It's not easy, but it's one of those things where I think it's just super important just because
Of
yeah,
course.
there's just a lot of opportunity to make sort of like incorrect inferences on the data that we have. So you need someone who's kind of
Yeah.
asking hard questions, really pushing to make sure they understand before jumping to the, solution or the result. And so I think that was something we really thought about. But also the folks on my team are really great consultants. Like they work with the business directly. They are awesome at telling narratives and kind of stories as far as like how to think about the data. And again, really are listening and they really understand the problems before they jump in. And I think that's been probably the big, thing that I look for
That's
in kind
hard
of the
though,
first few
right? Let's
hires.
be honest, to find someone that has both the technical skills and analytical
Yeah.
skills and the ability to tell a story, connect that
Totally.
and explain it in a language the business can understand. Normally, those two don't go hand in hand, from my experience.
Yes, those are the unicorns that are out there. But I think the way I try to think about it is like, well, as a manager, what do I feel more comfortable coaching to, right? So it's like, okay, what are my skills and what do I bring to the table as a manager, and where can I bring someone along that maybe doesn't have, let's say, as strong technical skills or maybe is not as great of a communicator? Maybe that's an opportunity where I can coach and kind of
Hmm.
give great kind of feedback and hopefully, help them there versus other things that are kind of non-negotiable or things that I need the person to have day one that I don't really want to
You can't
coach
teach someone
on
how
as
to
much,
code.
right?
Let's teach you how to code.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's just trying to think through that and like, what am I comfortable coaching to, and where do I feel like my energy should go as far
Yeah.
as like how we work together? And I think you kind of make trade-offs on that ultimately.
Did these people come within your network, or how did you go about finding this talent? Just out of curiosity, I'm not expecting you to tell us the entire plan, but just out of curiosity, was it external recruiters? Is it like people in your network? What was the approach that you took?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both. I mean, I think, the good news is I've built a pretty strong network in kind of certainly the Northeast and the Boston community. So I knew quite a few folks that were doing, I think really good analytical work. So I was able to bring in someone that I worked with previously at another company that I really trusted, which was great. I also hired externally for one who also was just awesome, just brought a great perspective. And then yeah, I think we kind of rode that for a bit, and then once we got to a certain, I think kind of level, we really expanded the team, and that allowed us to really bring in a lot more kind of different like backgrounds, skill sets, capabilities. So now we don't just have like a data scientist or a set of data scientists. We have consultants, program managers, behavioral researchers, behavioral scientists. I mean, so it's a much more of a, a mixed group now that we have a bit more size at our disposal.
Amazing. It sounds like you're a kid in a candy shop.
I've been very fortunate. I have a great team, and honestly, I think, I don't take the credit. Like, they do awesome work, and honestly, hiring is just so important, as we all know. So
Yep.
I try to take my time there and be really thoughtful, and I think that's paying a lot of dividends because they just do awesome stuff all the time.
Amazing. Well, look, you've provided so much great value. We could do a whole nother show. Before I let you go, I'm gonna jump into our quick fire round, which I never tell anyone in advance. So this is a surprise for you. I'm gonna ask you some. I'm asking you some questions, and you have no more than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a people analytics leader?
I think just finding my voice and being confident in kind of my judgment and thinking around things. So just being more vocal about where I think we needed to, what we needed to do, where we needed to focus. So that's been a big kind of improvement for me.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Solve for the customer. Honestly, I think that's the most important thing, and just making sure that you truly understand their problems and their challenges, and your work aligns to that.
Mm-hmm. What's one book you'd recommend to our audience, and why? It doesn't have to be one, it could be multiple. It doesn't even have to be people analytics related.
I mean, honestly, there's so many, but I think the classic, Work Rules is just such a fantastic book. It really sets the groundwork for people analytics, and really is just foundational. So if you're interested in this space, whether you're a practitioner or someone who wants to just learn more, it's just an awesome resource. So just fully recommend that one.
Is that Laszlo?
Yes.
Yeah, it is Laszlo Bock. Yeah, definitely check that book out. It's a great book.
Great book.
It's like always a go-to, right? It's a great book.
Absolutely.
How would your friends and family describe what you do for a living?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think they see just a lot of numbers and code and think there's some magic happening. So I don't know what they think. My wife has tried to explain to other folks what I do and fails epically. So I have to work on maybe a good one-liner for her.
What's a common misconception people have about you?
That I think I would say too data-driven, in the sense that I think I'm actually a balanced kind of, I have a balanced perspective. I understand the value of data, but I also understand the value of just, more anecdotal kind of qualitative work as well. So I'm not a pure numbers person, which I think sometimes maybe I give off that impression.
Okay, that's a good answer. What are some online resources do you use for your own productivity, or, your go-to resources to look at the latest research, etc.? What's in the browser?
Yeah. Certainly, your podcast is fantastic. I'll give you credit there. I think that's
I'll pay you later. I'll pay you later.
Resource for me. But, certainly there's a great website, Empirical HR, which I think does a great job kind of aggregating a lot of interesting HR and like data sorts of articles. David Green is also another person that's very much like a prominent voice in this space, who does an awesome job compiling resources. I think there's just so much good stuff out there. So honestly, it's just kind of finding the things that align to your interests, but there's just a lot of really good stuff on this in this space right now.
Where do you see the biggest opportunity for you and the team?
Yeah, so honestly, I do think it's on the kind of behavioral side, and mostly like I think like the personalization of HR. And I know a lot of folks have talked about this, so this is not like a new idea, but like I think this notion of, HR for the individual person, how they can better engage with the data and use it. I see that as probably like the future of this space, and some of the things that we work on, not just, HubSpot, but I think in broader people analytics, I could see that being kind of a big trend over the next few years.
And then last question, last but not least, what's one thing about the business that you're most excited about?
Oh my goodness, so much stuff. But yeah, I think it's just the fast-paced nature of it. I love, I had not worked at a really fast-paced company before, and this has been just such a roller coaster in a good way. I've just really enjoyed the challenges, really complex problems, and just a lot of autonomy to work through them. And for me, that's what really gets me excited every day, and it's a new challenge every day, which is awesome.
Amazing, amazing. Clearly, you're meant to be where you are right now, which is
Just worked
great.
out.
Look, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your experience and insights. I know our audience will be a lot better off for it, so I appreciate that. Before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice you would give to audience, what would that be? And then where's the best place they can connect with you if they want to say hello and reach out?
Yeah, so I think the parting piece of advice would just be, you don't have to be overly technical or have a ton of data at your disposal to, I think, do really good, impactful people analytics. I think people analytics can really work for any size company. It's just a matter, it's really a way of thinking more so than it is like techniques or tools. So I would just kind of encourage folks that are interested that maybe don't think or know the resources they need. I think just kind of digging in and doing something could actually go a long way. So that would be my piece of advice. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Where can they catch you? Where can they, if they want to say
Oh
hello, reach
yeah,
out, connect?
LinkedIn, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Absolutely a great way to chat. I'm pretty active there, so definitely feel free to send over a note or a request. Happy to connect via LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. And good luck with everything. And I wish you all the best until next week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Bye for now.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye.